Yeah, thank you everybody for joining on Sunday afternoon for the last day of the Ethereum conference. Just short words to myself as well. I'm co-founder and vice president of the Swiss NFT Association, but also representing Bein Crypto, a crypto media company, for which this conference has partnered up to do organic outreach. Yes, so all of you, as we heard, you're heavily involved in the crypto ecosystem with various projects, you're advisors or you founded companies yourself. Could each of you give a quick intro of what you want to focus on and what you have done in the past? Can we start?
Yes, so you've heard me before, I'll make it short, so I'm involved with Bitcoin Swiss, Bitcoin Association Switzerland, with Sheraz, which is a company that tokenizes shares of Swiss companies, and with the Swiss Blockchain Federation, and as a PhD at the University of Zurich.
Great, thanks a lot. Alex, what about you?
It's great to sit next to Luzius. He's really one of the OGs. He's been around since 2013. If you check YouTube videos of Bitcoin Association of the good old days, I wasn't there, I joined a bit later, but it's worth watching. So he has seen everything. And I think myself, I'm a bit in the same vein because I've been working in finance, but I've been a member of parliament for 7 years here in Switzerland. I've been in the army for 16 years, a very Swiss thing. And nowadays I'm working with different startups. I'm also president of Home of Blockchain.Swiss, which is promoting the Swiss ecosystem abroad. And I guess by listing all of that, it shows that I'm quite old. You're much younger than I am. And I think my big thing is, and my big passion is policy. And that sounds not very sexy, maybe to some of you, but hopefully I can elaborate why I do think that policy and technologies, and not only Bitcoin or crypto, but other technologies, AI, is really key, and it will shape the future of how we live. If we don't pay attention, it might not be such a good future. So that's why I'm here.
Great, yeah, definitely. We can go into the policy as well. What about you, Sheraz?
Yeah, fantastic. Maybe complimenting Alexandra there, bringing a little bit of the youth to the panel, potentially. Having been involved in the Crypto Valley ecosystem now for the past 6-7 years, I held various different roles, but 2 that I hold at the moment. So being the co-executive director of the Crypto Valley Association, we host a lot of events, webinars, networking activities. So any education that you're looking for, the Crypto Valley Association is there always to help. And I'm also the managing partner of Stone Partners, one of the leading 360-degree service providers in Europe, where we help essentially companies to scale and enter into the Web3 space. So yeah, I'm looking forward to speaking more about the blockchain ecosystem in Switzerland.
Awesome. Yeah, let's kick it off with the first question. So what are Switzerland USPs for the blockchain ecosystem? What differentiates it to the global market?
So maybe I start, yes. So we have some good advantages and some disadvantages. But one of the main advantages where we should make much more marketing about is we have really solid laws for the storage of crypto assets. So if you store crypto assets with Bitcoin Swiss, for example, and we do it right and we know how to do it, then you have a direct legal claim onto your Bitcoins and other crypto assets. So regardless of what happens with us, the Bitcoins are yours. So the law basically says, not your keys, still your Bitcoins. And this is different in other countries. For example, if you store Bitcoins with Coinbase and Coinbase goes bankrupt and the IRS says Coinbase still owes us taxes, then maybe IRS will get your Bitcoins to get the tax liability. Who knows? It's unclear, but in Switzerland we have cleared that. And I think this is a very important advantage that we have and that we don't use leverage enough.
Okay, so we have a clear policy in the country, and then Alex, you were saying that you're promoting Switzerland also abroad. What would you say?
Actually, just talking about my own book, we're going to publish, and you know, Luzius, we're going to publish the first digital asset custody report, and Bitcoin Swiss is in it as well. And I think custody is at the origination of everything else that will follow. If you cannot safekeep your crypto, everything else doesn't make sense. And we just, we found out the hard way with the FTX and Coinbase as well. And Switzerland really has an advantage, and it's still a complicated issue. And again, coming back also, Luzius has been instrumental in drafting this DLT law and the custody. So you know a lot about that. And it's a very good example how policy creates a new ecosystem. So sometimes in this community, people say regulation is bad. We don't want that. But here it's a clear example. If you have good policy and a good framework, certainty of law, then you can create adoption. So I do think Switzerland has been very good in adjusting the framework, but also a regulator that has been, listening to the community. I mean, I remember very well when the ICO guidelines came out. That was in early 2018, and the Swiss regulator back then, he went on a roadshow. He went to Ticino, he went to Geneva, to Zug, and explained that to the community. I haven't heard of any other regulator in the world who has ever left their offices to meet. In the US, the regulator will send you a letter saying you provide by Friday, and if you're not, you go to jail. So the Swiss ecosystem has always been at arm's length, and I think it's a cultural aspect, but it's also the way Switzerland, from a very grassroots federal level, works, and it has been a good fit with blockchain technology so far.
Yeah, fantastic. I think to add on to that, I think it is really this level of stability that you get in Switzerland. The ability for you as an entrepreneur to be able to grow your business here without maybe the laws changing every other day, or without there being, let's say, one body that can just one day to another just change everything within the environment. And if you look at, let's say, one of the fables of Jean de La Fontaine, slow and steady does win the race. If you look at the hare and the tortoise, I do believe that Switzerland has had some years of advance on some other countries, having had Ethereum being founded here in a lot of, let's say, the early days. But I think that Switzerland has always kind of taken their time to set up the various laws, to build the ecosystem, and has never gone too far ahead of itself. Whereas you look at other countries back in the day, be it, let's say, Malta, or be it other regions that have really tried to fast forward a lot of Switzerland that took a lot of its time to build up. And the fact that we've been advancing slowly but surely has, I think, created a lot of its accumulated success so far.
Mm-hmm. And Luzius, you were mentioning also maybe some negative drawbacks. What would something be in that area?
Yes. So one of the strengths of the Swiss system is a principle-based legal system. So that the law is much less detailed, or is supposed to be much less detailed than in other countries. And that gives more freedom for the executive and for judges and for scholars to create the right interpretation of the law. And this freedom can be used for good and for bad. And what I see a little is FINMA tends to interpret it on the more restrictive side. So there's one thing that we also criticize from Swiss Blockchain Federation, for example. They say if a Swiss bank issues a stable coin, then they essentially need to identify every single holder, so they basically enforce the whitelisting. And I think this is very destructive, because a stable coin, in order to survive, needs to be freely transferable. Maybe you can do a blacklisting like that have in the Tether or so. This I think might be a good solution, but you need to build it on the premise that the users are good, and the users should be able to freely use it before, and not have to register in advance with a centralized entity, because then you destroy the advantage of the blockchain technology again. And I think here there's a lot of work to be done. But another risk, of course, is that we don't actually have that much freedom and political willpower to deviate from international norms. So Switzerland, and I think that this is a good strategy overall. Switzerland always says we need international norms. All the countries need to adhere to the same standards. And this helps us as a small country to survive. If everyone adheres to the law and common standards, then we are protected from the power play of big countries to a certain degree. But that means that we, as a strategy, always implement all the international regulations very quickly, even though if they are nonsense. And we have seen some nonsense rules recently coming, for example, from the Basel Committee, which is very crypto hostile. So they created capital requirements like completely, it cannot be justified with mathematical risk models. They say, for example, a bank can have at most a crypto exposure of at most 1% of its tier 1 capital, which is complete nonsense. So all the tier 1 capital of all US banks together is 2,000 billion. 1% of that is 20 billion. So essentially they say on all the balance sheets of all the American banks together, there can be at most 20 billion of crypto. Otherwise it's too risky. And this is, I don't know, it's a political attack against crypto, because obviously they don't like it. And now we have this difficult situation that there is adverse malevolent laws coming in or standards coming in, and we have this clash of policies. On the one hand, we should have the rule of law, we should have freedom, we should be freedom of economic freedom to do business in whatever way you like, as long as it's in compliance with all the good, with the reasonable regulation. And on the other hand, we have this principle to implement all the international standards. And there's a big clash here, and I'm afraid that our government will simply say, we implement the international standards even if they are completely stupid.
And maybe you two, are you, the companies that you're working with, are you creating regulations, or are you in contact with the government to oppose these regulations that will be set in place that would be negative for crypto?
The Swiss Blockchain Federation has working groups that is in contact with the regulator, and the Bank for the International Settlement as well. But I think maybe just to take one step back, because the panel is blockchain, and I know Luzius, I think that there's a lot that is applying to crypto. And what I have been seeing in recent weeks or months, I think if you talk about blockchain is a foundational technology that allows different use cases. Crypto was the first one, Bitcoin, and it has many, Ethereum and all that. So there's a lot of built on that. But what I have been seeing, and where Switzerland at least is, I think, quite at the forefront, is when it comes to tokenization of real-world assets. And I mean, your company do that as well, auction out with SME shares or with digital bonds. And the Swiss National Bank is gearing up for a first live CBDC trial for digital bonds. So there's a lot, and that's simply, it's a different regulatory framework. And you can also see that in the EU, because the EU has this new MiCA guideline, which is about crypto. So anything that's sort of, Bitcoin and Ethereum, Dogecoin, all those things. And in MiFID, they now make amendments for real-world assets. So if you're going to transact bonds on the blockchain, there's different sets of regulatory. And I think thirdly, and maybe Sheraz has also more to say about that, everything that is Web3, NFTs, creative economy, that's, again, a completely different ecosystem that doesn't have the same challenges. So I think it really depends on what sector you look at. And I think historically Switzerland, with its financial center, has a lot of touch points with the crypto side of things and with Bitcoin association and all that. But I hope that Switzerland can sort of reach out and not only be strong in there, but also when it comes to tokenization of real world assets. There have been recently Lugano, the city of Lugano, created the first digital bond. So there's a lot of experiments as well. And also in the Web3 space. And maybe just one negative thing about the Swiss ecosystem, and it's a conundrum in the whole developing, in dev world or software development world. You don't need to be anywhere actually to develop tech anymore. And I think what we've been seeing here, sort of the thriving startup ecosystem, it's probably not in Switzerland. We have some interesting startups, but because of the living cost here, I mean, people are developing. In Asia is very strong, even US is very strong, you got Eastern Europe is very strong. So I think, as we've seen in other sectors, like developing a thriving startup ecosystem with developers and entrepreneurs, I'm not sure if Switzerland is the strongest here, and there's room for improvement.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think speaking towards some more of the challenges of Switzerland, I mean, I'm definitely a big Swiss maxi when I go abroad, but we have to be neutral sometimes and kind of evaluate some of the critical points. I think the main one for me is access. Access on, let's say, the HR perspective, the people, a little bit to what Alexandra was saying, and then kind of, let's say, the capital side, where we all know that Switzerland is quite an expensive country as well. So without the appropriate funding, let's say, be it in a seed stage, private sale, etc., it is quite hard for some entities to be able to come to Switzerland to be able to incorporate or even to kind of, let's say, start shop. The same goes, I think, with the human side of things. If you have a big team, it's very hard to bring a lot of your team members here, be it for, let's say, visa problems. I mean, I know that we're going to discuss a little bit about other jurisdictions as well, like Dubai and the likes, but I think that's definitely one difficulty as well, where we do say that Switzerland is open to the world, but it is difficult as well to access that for some individuals around the world as well. So yeah, the people side of Switzerland can be a little bit difficult at times, and then also, let's say, the fact that Switzerland is an expensive country, but then when you look at value, I think it does provide the value for that expense that you're paying for, but it's not always at the access of everyone.
How do you see it with the global dynamic? So US is cracking down more or less on crypto, and then also in Europe, other countries are coming up, like Germany, for example. There's a lot of things happening there, France as well, and you mentioned Eastern Europe, but also in the Asian countries. How do you see the dynamics evolving now with US being more regulated, or fear of US being more regulated?
I think literally with MiCA and also what's happening in Germany, you know, KfW is now doing digital bonds. So the Germans have really caught up to this opportunity of creating, I mean, they have these digitales Wertpapiergesetz, whatever they translate into English. So they were sort of following suit of what Switzerland has been doing. And it's a bigger market. So they're driving that. And then you've got other countries. I was recently in Serbia, and they also have a new blockchain or crypto law, which was very interesting because in that law, I didn't read it entirely, but coming back to what Luzius says, you know, Switzerland has a principle-based approach, and the Serbians decided they're going to write the content table of the white paper into the law. So in the law, it says exactly what the white paper needs to look like. And I think, you know, when we have these discussions, I mean, the legal framework is key, but there's different aspects. There's the HR aspect, there's the compliance, there's the tax aspect. Switzerland sort of has a bit of a lead because we have more experience, but we're sort of bumping into the same issues we have often. You know, we're a small country, the home market isn't that big. So if bigger markets come online, like Germany or the UK now, trying to be more crypto friendly. Let's see. So we're still in the race, and I think like everywhere else, Switzerland has to sort of think about where are our strengths, where can we focus on, where can we have a lead, and where maybe other countries are just more attractive. You know, and I think this is still in development.
Yeah, definitely. And just to bounce on that point, I think Switzerland is one close to now, it's become close to a decade, that it's one of the most innovative country in the world. And I think that really happens at the grassroots side of things, but then we do face a certain brain drain when it comes to then the fundraising. If you're going for a Series A, it's much easier to do so out of Switzerland, be it in the Americas or in other regions of the world. And I do believe that maybe we can counteract that now with some of the things happening in those areas, that due to, let's say, the regulatory frameworks of Switzerland, Europe as a whole, we can bring back some of, let's say, that brain that kind of went to maybe the Silicon Valley or other areas of the world and bring it back to this region. So I definitely believe that it is Europe's time to shine now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for example, the Post Finance is now offering to their customers that they can buy Bitcoin or Ethereum with a partnership with Signum. Do you see this as a positive development, or will this draw more and more people to use blockchain technology?
Definitely, this is very positive. So it makes crypto more accessible. Of course, it means that companies like Bitcoin Swiss need to think about where can they still add value if everyone already has crypto with their own banks. But there's plenty of opportunities, especially in DeFi, where we can be pioneers and offer access.
And do you think this will drive the Swiss ecosystem forward if we look at it from a competitive state, for example, inside of Europe?
Yes, it certainly will drive adoption. It could also help for crypto being used as a payment currency, which is, I think this was the original idea behind Bitcoin, peer-to-peer cash system.
Yeah.
But it's not used that much for payments. It's mostly used for DeFi, which is also fine, but it's not. There's still a lot of untapped potential for payments.
Did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, regarding the retail side, I think it is great, or at least I hope it is. You know, if you go outside of this kind of, let's say, room, or to a certain extent maybe an echo chamber, sometimes you go out and get your train, you speak to anyone about crypto, they're going to have a negative connotation towards it. At least most people, they might say it's scammy, they might say I'm not too sure if I trust it, etc. So I think and I hope that Post Finance and the bodies around there are bringing out educational programs around that offering, because just being able to buy an asset, and it depends on how you look at, be it Ethereum or Bitcoin, but just being able to buy an asset class that is volatile is important to be able to have the certain education of understanding the risk assessment of what you're buying into, so that we don't end up getting into a new, let's say, bull run where retail is buying in heavily again, and then it goes down and they kind of say, well, I was able to buy this at Post Finance, this is a scam, etc. So then being able to understand what they're actually getting into, I think, is very important. But ultimately, it is good that there is that access.
Yeah, you were talking about a good point there, education. So to educate also the masses or the individuals. Are you yourself working on this with CVA or Storm, for example?
Definitely. Within the Crypto Value Association, I think that is the ethos of the association, is to be able to bring further integrity to the space. We have started an international expansion as well. Due to the pandemic, doing a lot of webinars, a lot of events online. We do see it as being quite important. We have working groups that are able to accommodate to the niches of, let's say, the blockchain world, be it from a regulatory standpoint, investor working groups, cybersecurity, etc. So we always do try to be as inclusive as possible. But I think, we've been going on about education for the past, let's say, 7 years that I've been involved in the space. I think it always is quite difficult to be able to grasp for various individuals. I think it has been difficult for us to be able to give that certain level of education. A lot of individuals are ask me sometimes, okay, but when is blockchain going to have its ChatGPT moment? And then I kind of refer to Bitcoin. I was like, well, look, it has all this access. It has done some of that. But I think we still need to be able to provide that certain tangible use cases potentially, and that education through maybe different means. Maybe post-finance is a mean there where you associate cryptocurrencies with a trusted brand already, and that kind of helps for individuals to kind of lower maybe their guard and be like, okay, maybe this is something that I should start exploring. And then potentially there are other ways, such as, let's say, the University of Zurich, a lot of things that they're doing, and the likes.
Mm. And on a national level, like Alex, for example, you recently joined the Smart City board to help out with that development in Zurich, correct? So is that a hint of what's going to happen in the future?
Actually, the smart city engagement is because I'm working with AI companies as well, confusingly. The cities in that sense have no crypto policy or blockchain policy yet. But maybe just zooming out again on your question, because I think the international comparison is interesting, and where I think post-finance is really a strong signal of how Switzerland has been approaching the topic. The Swiss government and the Swiss regulator said back going to, the ICO guidelines even before, I think the FINMA opened a fintech desk in 2015. It's not only for crypto, but they had a fintech desk, say, hey, there's new developments happening, we want to understand. And the Swiss regulator always had the approach, we're going to give licenses if you adhere to the rules. So in Switzerland, if you think about it, we have crypto banks, we have Swiss registered crypto funds, we have brokers, you can have the depositories or custodians, you have a lot of different licenses type. And the approach always has been in Switzerland, those are the rules. You can even have a discussion where we're happy to discuss. Bitcoin Swiss had a not so successful discussion with the regulator about the banking license, but at least there is discussion going on. And I think that was always the strength of Switzerland. If you compare it with the US, where even nowadays the two regulators, SEC and CFTC, are still discussing or arguing who's in charge, obviously that doesn't make for a good framework. Or if you compare with Singapore, which has had this discussion before, Singapore when they came out with regulation, they said, oh, we understand Bitcoin is payment, so we're going to give payment licenses. So they only gave out payment licenses, sort of cross-border payments. And they haven't given any banking license, they haven't given any fund license. And what you have seen is now with 3 Arrows and some other accidents, if you as a regulator don't let innovation happen, then it might happen, it might still happen, but not in a good way. And I think, and that's also maybe looking at the negative side again. I mean, if post-finance, hopefully, I have no doubts, with Signum they have a very robust setup, but coming back to what Sheraz says, obviously the moment there's a big fallout, there's political action. If you don't believe me, just look at what happened with Credit Suisse. They just had a session this week. So I think the risk from a regulator or from a policy side is how much regulation do you let happen, and saying basically those are the rules. If you want to play according, then we give you a license. How much prosecution or sort of prevention you want to do, and what do you do in the case if something goes really bad? Touching wood, I think there hasn't been a massive fallout so far in Switzerland. But I do believe one has to be careful when one sets up, the post-finance. I know they've been working at it for more than 3 years in different configurations. So on one hand, you can say, hey, it has taken so long. This is not good for innovation. On the other hand, if something then goes wrong and post-finance is sort of semi-government owned, that would send a really bad signal. So I'm just trying again, a bit of my policy angle where you have to balance those two sides, where the community wants to go fast, and maybe from a political voice, sometimes you got to say you got to be a bit more careful. I do think up to now it can be debated that Switzerland has struck quite a good balance. Not always. Also, when it comes to travel rules, there's sometimes a bit an overreach, but let's see. And I think last but not least, I think with MiCA coming into place and other countries coming online, this will create, again, more competitive pressure and will make it also more acceptable in a broad term. So one of the positive things, I think, this year, despite what happened with FTX, I haven't heard anyone saying crypto should be banned anymore. I think everyone sort of has accepted that it's here to stay. But we need to keep working on the framework. So I think, overall it's positive, but regulation and policy obviously slows things down. That's the idea of policy. But it's not liked by everyone. And getting that balance right, maybe also, I think you're more active in the Middle East. I've never been. I get a lot of requests. I mean, Dubai at the moment seems the place to go when you want to go fast. I don't know, maybe that's an interesting topic. Even I struggle with, is that good or is that bad? I don't know. Do you? Yeah,
it is a difficult one. And I'll definitely touch upon that. And just to close what you were saying before, and if you look at the way in which Switzerland has adopted crypto, I think it's really been kind of, let's say, a top-down, right? And let's say the down being, let's say, the retail. And I'm very happy, again, that they are getting to that point. But I do believe that we've missed a little bit of a layer there, whereby we work with a lot of innovative companies, startups, etc. And it is still very hard today for startups to get a crypto bank account. We do parade SEBA, Signa, Merki, etc. But we all do know that they do have certain capital requirements, and it is quite difficult for young startups to get bank accounts with them. So I would have seen it as being much more helpful or even fruitful for the ecosystem if post-finance would have said, what, we're opening accounts for startups that might not have significant funding. If they pass the appropriate due diligence, they can get access to bank accounts. And some might say that that's actually today it is possible, but we have seen that it is a big struggle. And so potentially with small to medium-sized businesses being able to open crypto bank accounts in an easier way or in a more democratized way, it would allow then for the retail audiences to be able to then use their digital assets, crypto assets within, be it online or in a retail format. So maybe that layer, in my opinion, could have been filled a little bit better, but potentially my colleagues here have something to add on that front.
Yes, there's often very basic things that are not easy. Or if one of the founders has an American passport, also very hard to get a bank account. There's things like that should be fundamentally, it's basic infrastructure of a country, and it's interestingly still very complicated, do very basic things, and this is a long-term problem. Also, when I talk to someone with a crypto project, say one of the problems is at least 50% of the brain cycles go into legal matters when you do a crypto project, and he says it's way more, maybe 80%, and this is bad. This means that 80% of the resources are essentially wasted. They are not used for creating something, they're just used to navigate the legal system. And only 20%, or I'm not that pessimistic, maybe 50% goes into actually building a useful product. And this shows that there is still a lot of potential to make better laws, and this concerns everyone. This does not only concern crypto. So there's many areas that are over-regulated, where every step feels like walking in a tar pit, where you're held back by a lot of rules and regulations. And interestingly, it's not only government regulation, it's also within large companies. That's why large companies cannot really innovate. Like Google or Facebook, they struggle with innovation. They have to acquire innovation because they are so large, they have so many internal rules and regulations that it's very hard to move freely.
So with aspect of innovation and regulation, what would you propose? Is it better to innovate or to understand the regulation and then safely start your company?
So there's two angles. One is the macro angle. As a country, we should make it as easy as possible to create a company, because innovation comes from the small entities, not from the big ones. So they should be as free as possible to create things and to focus on product development and so on. And for a company, if you create a startup, you cannot get around having a holistic view. And ideally, you have someone who in the same brain unifies the legal, the economic, and the technical perspective. Of course, this is the ideal case, and in practice, you need to distribute often. But it adds a lot of complexity that you have to cover all three angles. And you can have the best technical product. If you have no clue about the economics or the legal angle, then you have a problem. So you need all three.
And with what you mentioned before, that the Credit Suisse collapsed recently, and other banks in the United States, and then before that, crypto entities like FTX, Circle, and so on. I mean, that's kind of an indicator that there would be more regulation rather than less to prevent these things from happening. How do you see that outlook in Switzerland? Will it cause ripple effects? What happened to Credit Suisse?
Maybe not for crypto or blockchain directly, but clearly the financial system has now a good name. No one likes bankers. You know, I'm not sure crypto people are more like than bankers or not, but it's sort of. I think the problem with finance is, I once asked Mark Branson, the former CEO of FINMA, why do we need regulation in finance? And he gave a very clever answer, and he said, it's very easy to run away with other people's money. And it's true, you know, we've seen it with FTX. Unfortunately, it is true. And sort of, I think, one of the challenges of blockchain, but it's not only blockchain, like I said, I mentioned, I'm also active in AI, and I think AI goes very much in the same bucket. If something goes wrong at those systems, because there's such scale and such speed, the fallout can be really bad. And whenever there's a big fallout, and that's sort of anonymously across the world, whenever there's a big fallout, politicians will jump up and say, this is bad, we need to regulate, we need to kill it, we need to stop it. You know, Credit Suisse, you know, we see it live here. I've seen it with, if you Google it, the Monetary Authority after the Three Arrows disaster, they came up, we're going to explain why we still like crypto, but in what way, because they've been very open and positive before about crypto, and now the reality is, to what I'm talking to people there, they're really tightening the screws. So the challenge when it comes to innovation is, you want to let it happen and grow, because you can't always regulate beforehand, because sometimes it's very hard to know what's happening. At the same time, you need to prevent really big fallouts that is impacting a lot of people. So a lot of companies have been adopting sandboxes. You know, they're known in UK, in Singapore, those time. Switzerland is sort of the fintech license, but I think we haven't been that strong. So I would like, if I had a wish, we could see more sandboxes where we're saying, you know, we contain it, you can play around, and we watch it, and we learn. And last but not least, one point I'd like to make, you know, because often, to what I stated before, when you have conferences like these, people say regulators are bad, regulation is bad, it kills innovation, we need to. But on one hand, you have this fallout problem. The other thing, I was at the OECD Blockchain Policy Forum last October, and there was IMF, FATF was there, World Bank, OECD was there, and they literally said, we don't understand it. We literally don't know what's going on. And it's very hard to police for us. So you have, you know, when it comes to education, it's not all about education of the users. It's really hard. And I recently was at a panel with the FINMA about NFTs. People ask, what is an NFT? And FINMA said, we don't know. And it's like, NFT is a word. So what they do is you have to present the white paper. They read the white paper, and then they come to a conclusion, you have a discussion with them, but it's actually very hard to understand. And sometimes when you talk to crypto people, the lingo is a bit bewildering. You know, it's not always that clear when you look at, you know, I have a long list of funny quotes where people talk about that. So I think you need to sort of strike a balance between also educating the regulator, because the regulator at the end of the day has the responsibility, or should have the responsibility, to protect the wider society from big fallouts while allowing innovation. Obviously, when you start up, the only thing you think about is innovation. I want to go to market. You don't think about society. But coming back, AI, it's not a topic here, but I think what is happening in AI at the moment is it's a seminal moment in tech and humankind, and it's very hard to understand. Even for politicians, you had contact with politicians in Bern. How many understand blockchain? Most people don't understand blockchain. So when there's this mistrust, obviously, the natural reaction is we want to stop this. We don't understand it, And I think it's about us. It's for all of us. We need to find a balance in society of agreeing what kind of innovation we want, and that's very hard. I don't know, that was a long answer to your but I can tell, I'm sort of passionate about it, and that you're in the room, it's your future.
Yes. It also means that you have to innovate responsibly. So you have to make sure that what you do is actually useful and not just taking away someone else's money. And this is, I think, this is also how we win the hearts and minds of the public, if we can deliver actual value and not just another way to rip someone off. And so as a small example, when I designed the Frankencoin system, I made sure that the economic equilibrium is in a state where about a third of all Frankencoins in circulation are in the reserve, which is a lot. This is much more than the 10% tier 1 capital that the banks have today. So it is a much higher, more safe capital requirement that I have kind of built in. Of course, there could be a competitor who says, I copy the whole protocol and have a different requirement. But I think it's something that we should strive for, to make sure that what we do delivers value. And then we can also win on the public and the regulatory front, because it's very easy to attack crypto if it's mostly used for ransomware.
And yeah, let's zoom in also onto the country level. So we have different hotspots for the blockchain ecosystem in Switzerland. So like Zug, Zurich is coming up. Geneva is also quite active. Maybe Sheraz, what's going on in Geneva, and how do you see it different to other countries?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I have a little bit of a controversial kind of one to this point, and I hope, let's say, the panelists will maybe give another side of the coin. Is that I believe, a common thread of innovation is kind of stay foolish, stay hungry, right? And crypto has been around, or blockchain within Switzerland has been around for quite some time. And if we look at, let's say, the foundational layers of where things came to be it in, let's say, the Zug area, I do believe that maybe, let's say, Zug as a region has become not complacent, but they have a lot of requests. They are very well known now, and I think they are less hungry than they maybe once were. And I think that can be a good thing as well, because it's allowed other areas of Switzerland to expand, be it, of course, let's say by proxy Zurich, but also Lugano with the Plan B Forum. We've always had, let's say, Neuchâtel with the Bitcoin Maxis, and now actually Geneva as well. And of course, to a certain extent, I'm biased because I come from, let's say, that region, but I do believe that the French-speaking part of Switzerland has not maybe have gotten so much attention on that front, and it's something that I'm very much looking forward to building up, because within Geneva there is a very important industry, or many different important industries, from, let's say, the NGO perspective. There's a lot of watchmaking, there's a lot of large enterprises, etc. And I do believe that if we can create more consensus around, let's say, Switzerland as a whole, and not just, let's say, the crypto valley being known as Zug, but let's say the crypto valley being the whole of Switzerland, potentially as well bridging, let's say, Liechtenstein. Within that, I think it's going to create a lot of prosperous outcomes. And yeah, very much looking forward to building that out some more.
And what about you two? Do you have a favorite city or a specific stereotype or preference, or how do you see it in Switzerland?
Within Switzerland?
Yeah, within Switzerland.
It depends a bit what angle. I've been involved with a few companies who want to come to Switzerland. Obviously, first they don't know. Everyone knows Zug, so that's always popping up. So I think that's the de facto setting for anyone. And then, I mean, Lucerne has been trying very hard to attract companies. Zurich has just advantage. I mean, some of the crypto companies are here, or blockchain companies, because it's just the best place to live. Not everyone wants to live in Zug. I mean, Ticino now has this Tether support initiative with this co-working space. So there. And I think at the end of the day, what I coming back to what I said initially, it's the beauty about Switzerland is this grassroots approach that is very much, it's decentralized, very much like the blockchain idea. And if you think about it, and if the cantons, I mean, the city, I give an example, the city of Lugano issued this digital bond. It was actually the city of Lugano who also started Plan B. It was not even the canton, it was the city. So the beauty about Switzerland is that every canton can try out. And if something sticks, then other cantons will come and try to copy it. Now, Zug is now active, but now, for example, Geneva, the canton of Geneva now is in discussion. And so a lot of them are now waking up to that fact. And again, even within Switzerland, you got different tax regimes, you got different, rents, or even when it comes to visas, it's very hard in Zurich. Zug, I don't know, I have no concrete experience, but maybe you go to another canton and then there's different visa quotas. So again, it's a very dynamic situation. But it can also be a bit bewildering to foreigners, because they go just to, if you go to Dubai or to Singapore, it's basically one city. But I think this is, in this pluralism, Switzerland can test different concepts. And Zug has a very good reputation, but I still remember, it's a bit of a funny story, when Plan B announced last year they're going to go ahead, they had a meeting with the canton of Zug, the finance department, and there was a lot of media reception about this Plan B. It made it in global headlines. And one of the headlines was, now you can pay with Bitcoin at McDonald's. And then I had to listen for about 10 minutes that, Zug, obviously you can do that much longer, you can pay taxes. So Zug was really pissed that Lugano got this, publicity. And I even had to tell them, well, you know that Luzius, because of Bitcoin Swiss, you can even pay with your credit cards in Bitcoin through the terminals. You can do that already. I bought a bicycle helmet last year as a publicity stunt. But anyhow, so it's sometimes when you look at the cantons, this is a good dynamic in Switzerland, because if someone pops up and does something so successful, it literally can piss off other cantons, and they start then moving ahead. And I think it's overall still a positive dynamic, because if something then takes root, they become more vocal, and hopefully coming back to the national politics, also then tell their representative, hey, we need to look into that. We can't just kill it. And I think, coming back what I said before, no one now is saying we want to kill Bitcoin. And also one of the few positive things out of the US, what I'm seeing, you see literally adoption when it comes to big financial institution. From exchanges, NASDAQ is working on tokenization programs. You got the big Wall Street firms coming. It's not always, fully forced adoption, but I think it has reached a level where everyone thinks it's not going to go away. It's not going to get killed. I do believe that Americans, as they've always done, they will sort out. They'll put a few people in jail for the rest of their life and make it very public. But they'll catch up again. And I think, again, I'm really enthusiastic at the moment, because Europe, with MiCA that's coming in force next year, has decided to create the framework. And if you look back at historically, the Swiss financial center always had the challenge how to access the European market. And actually, we've done quite well. The banks are still around. Well, one less, one less. But overall, we've done. And I hope that this is a skill the Swiss have. We're actually very good in making bridges and building bridges. And Singapore is another point. Among the top 10 financial institutions in Singapore, 6 are Swiss. So we actually, it's our strength. Because we are small, we need to build bridges, we need to go abroad. And I think this spirit gives us an advantage overall, despite all the negative things that exist. So I'm still positive. It's a good location to start.
Very nice, yeah. And taking everything as a whole, what we talked about some negative and then also a lot of positive points. What's your feeling, Luzius? Are you more bearish, bullish?
I am very bullish. I'm optimistic. I see a lot of value being created. So that's what I criticized before, that maybe we should focus more on value. But there is value. And once I was in a panel with a German policymaker who said there's no value in blockchain. It's only financial applications, these ICOs and these things. But there is value in financial applications. So maybe we don't use blockchain to do some logistics, because there's always friction when you connect it to the real world. But being able to finance things is essential for an economy to thrive. And if we have innovation in financing projects, be that through tokenized assets, through DeFi, through completely decentralized organizations, so there's so much innovation out there. Uniswap has now more trading volume than Coinbase, I've seen. Mm-hmm. And it can compete with the Swiss stock exchange. which is crazy. So there's a lot of value being created, a lot of economic activity, and this makes me very hopeful.
Great. What about you, Sheraz? What's your outlook?
Yeah, I think bouncing on what Luzius and Alexander were saying, I think due to the competition, but the healthy competition of Switzerland, and due to, let's say, that mini sandbox that it does create, I'm very bullish for Switzerland as a whole, very bullish for crypto as well, as we've seen this year. I think we have learned from some of our mistakes, and I think it's going to be a really great year ahead. Quite bullish.
Great. Did you want to add anything, Alex? Or you're also bullish?
I want to ask Luzius if he's ever been not bullish, but since I know he's been bullish. But I think there's a lot happening beneath there. And coming back to what I said, don't look just at crypto. I think crypto is always the bubbly, the speculative, sometimes the unsavory bit of the whole system. But the tokenization of assets, I give you an example of a company I'm involved in. One of the biggest markets in the world is the capital markets for bonds. This is where governments and states and cities refinance them. This market is still nowadays a so-called OTC market, over the counter. There's no central settlement system. And why is that a problem? Because last time in 2007-8, we had the financial crisis. It literally took the banks weeks to figure out what kind of counterparty positions they have. So this is a very old system. You know, I do believe in payment. I know you mentioned that payment sort of works nowadays, but there are massive markets out there that run on legacy infrastructure. And if blockchain just enables better transparency from a risk point of view, this is actually good for society. And the company I'm involved in, it's a Luxembourg-based or Portuguese, and they now have a lot of traction by regulators, because the regulators are saying, we're afraid, because interest rates are now going up. If 2007-8 happens again, the same disaster will happen. We literally don't know what the counterparty positions are. So I think that's a very positive thing. And on a very fundamental point of view, I've been in this space for 7 years. I think the best thing is that I see all those people here listening to we're talking about monetary policy, capital markets, technology, policy, regulation. I've been recently to an event that said, I think the regulators, even the Bank of International Settlement and Augustin Carsten, should be happy that so many young people now thinking about the financial system again. Because it's not this abstract thing that happens, you know, that banks do. We should all be involved because it has real world implications in how we live. So on that, I have to be bullish. And it's great because it exists, and I always, as I've said that before on another occasion, if the Bank for International Settlement or OECD, if you presented back in 2008 the Bitcoin white paper to them, they would have said, no, we don't want that. You know? They would never have said yes to this idea. But it happened, and it's out there, and because of that, they now have to respond. And I think this is overall a good trend for society. So it's out of the box. Let's have a discussion about it. And we can have different views, and different countries will have different applications or rules, and that's a good thing. You know, I believe in competition overall, and this is what is happening.
This is excellent. I think people sometimes don't think it's much more efficient if you centralize, if everyone decides in one point in Brussels for all of Europe or in FATF for all of the world. But this is not good. If you have a regulatory monoculture, then you cannot innovate anymore. Then you can never figure out if there would be maybe different rules that would enable for more growth, more innovation. So it's very, very important, especially for a sector that is young, to enable different approaches and to allow different approaches. And that's also one of the reasons why I think it's harmful when the Bank of International Settlement tries too early to create binding rules for all countries at the same time, because then we lose this innovative power.
Yeah, thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll take the last minutes to also take some questions from the audience. But first off, thank you very much for your great answers and for the amazing panel. Thank you.
Thanks.
Give some round of applause to the panel at this point. Then we have some time for a few questions.
All the way on the top, we have one.
I see this. It's a very decentralized seating order.
Thank you very much for the very interesting conversation and discussion. I'm a PhD student at HSG, and I'm studying the adoption, in one of the papers that I'm writing, I'm studying the adoption of DLT technologies. And what sort of, what I find interesting is that corporate adoption of distributed ledgers is sort of, I feel like, lagging maybe a bit behind. And I see a strong case with immutability of transactions and the transparency, why we don't see a move of corporations trying to maybe have their accounting on chain. And I was wondering why that is. Thanks.
I can give like the enterprise side of things, as we've worked with quite a few, and I think they just struggle to be able to get things through their internal processes in time for it still to be relevant. This space moves very quickly, and you need to be able to adapt quite quickly to the markets. You mentioned kind of, let's say, putting accounting on chain, but if you look at other sides of DLT, let's say blockchain, being able to have use cases such as, let's say, the NFT side of things, the metaverse side, etc. I know that a lot of companies want to get things through. They hire various firms for strategies, try to work things out, but by the time they have the approval, actually it becomes a little bit irrelevant. So I know that there are a lot of firms that have, or actually most firms, I believe, let's say within, be it the S&P 500 or the likes, have had at one point a blockchain-based project in the works and are still probably working on it, or have just decided, look, this is a bit too complicated for us to innovate. We might just, let's say, acquire a firm that has been able to successfully do it and then integrate it into our processes. But that's the perspective that I've had.
Is that good, or did you want to add anything?
Next question.
Next question. Okay.
Thank you so much. Amazing panel. The best one for me in the past 3 days. Curious, because I haven't really heard this during these 3 days. Network states and hashtag decentralized Switzerland, like best practices shared on a maybe digital citizenship level, something like that. Any conversations in the ecosystem around that network states? Thank you.
I can try one angle, maybe Luzius can add up, but I think it all is centering, one of the biggest problems you're seeing in DeFi, in general, when you want digital adoption in a decentralized fashion, is identity. And once you dig into that, I mean, in Switzerland, we had a vote about an EID, and that was not approved, and we're working now on iteration number 2. And I think, to me, this is one of the most interesting bits of this entire blockchain discussion that's happening when it comes to identity. Because if you want to, whatever you want to do online, you need to make sure whoever is voting or taking decisions is the person she is or he is. So, and I think there's zero knowledge proof. There's different startups trying to tackle that. And interesting, I had a panel on the WEF in January, and it's a big question for refugees, for the UN. The UN is really desperate to try to figure out how do you create identity online. So I think we're at the very beginning. We have to crack the identity bit, and it's one of the most fascinating sectors, I think, personally, because it really is about humans and digital identities. How do you merge that? And not only for us here, but for refugees, people without passports, highly fascinating. So I think we're early stage in that, but interesting.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more? Good. Okay, one more.
Thank you. So I was wondering, recently the New York Attorney General talked about Ethereum maybe, or hinted at it being called a security. So, talking about Switzerland wanting to support innovation and taking kind of care of the mass and the risks. Many people feel like in US it's not that way. It's kind of like the regulation and the government against innovation and blockchain and all the other topics. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And is Switzerland different than US in that sense? Or, what are your thoughts? And also, what are the risks of Ethereum becoming a security for the whole blockchain ecosystem?
So if that would happen, that would be devastating, because securities are completely differently regulated from currencies, which is kind of a strange thing, but it's like that in the law. So if something is a currency, it's easy to transfer, it's easy to create a company that trades it. If something is a security, then you need a whole exchange, which is very tough, very hard regulated. You need a lot of capital. It's almost impossible to do it as a startup. So this is actually bad regulation, because there's no good place to put crypto in there. Crypto often, like the Ethereum token, is not a pure currency. So I agree with this attorney general. It serves an investment purpose. But if you just say it's a security, then you destroy its value or a lot of the potential, because it doesn't fit in there as well. And the European Union did actually something quite good. I'm often very critical of them, but I think it's good with the MiCA regulation. It's a statement to say it's something different. It's not a security, it's not a currency, it's something in between with new modes of investments and financing. And Switzerland, of course, is now in a spot where we need to decide, do we copy the Americans or the European Union? And traditionally, it's not. Sometimes we copy the US, sometimes the European Union. I would guess that we would side more with the European Union, because our legal system is more similar to that. But we don't have this legal framework of MiCA, so I would be very surprised if they would suddenly say Ether is a security. But the other tokens are more at risk.
I think just picking back, it's one of the biggest conundrums out there. What is a coin? Because if you look at it from a very, non-tech perspective, it's just code, it's algorithm, and a coin can be all sorts of things. I mean, I've seen coins they can do staking, they can pay interest, you can voting, governance, you can do anything. And if you buy an Apple share, it's an Apple share tomorrow. It's in a week, it's an Apple share. It's not going to come and be a US dollar or become something else. But in a coin, anything can be programmed. Switzerland at least has an ICO guideline where the government or the regulator is trying to figure out what it is. And MiCA now creates this virtual asset definition, but it's the same problem. And then Serbia as well, they have different categories. I think everyone is struggling with what it is. And the US is I mean, I think they only agree that Bitcoin is not a security, the CSC and the CFTC. And for everything else, even the regulators, they fight about what it is. But I understand, because a coin, technically, I mean, Ethereum can be a lot of different things, from NFT to utility token to security and payment. It can be all of that. The question is, how do you label it? And I think that's the most fascinating aspect. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the approaches are different between, let's say, the US and Switzerland. Switzerland has always been open to communicating with the public through, let's say, non-action letters, being able to communicate directly with FINMA and be like, hey, this is what I'm trying to build up. What do you think? And I think with, let's say, the SEC or with the US, it's been a little bit like whack-a-mole. If you're a little bit too loud and you pop up too much on their radar, then you get whacked. So I think they do need to approach things maybe a little bit more in a collaborative sense. And I think, as Alex was mentioning before, I think they will slowly but surely get their act together. But I think, Switzerland as a whole has great measures in place for these things.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot again for the question first, and the great panel, also for the moderation, Victor. That was fantastic. Give another hand to our great panelists down here.